Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to bring up a chart that previously I did not have the birth time for, but now that I have the birth time, we're going to explore his chart deeper, because before I looked at it from the moon, and it is totally valid looking at charts from the moon when you don't have a birth time. And we knew that his moon was always going to be in Leo because it was in Leo the whole day. But who am I talking about? Elon Musk. We finally have an accurate birth time for him. And so let's put his chart up here to see what his ascendant rising sign is and truly what he's all about. So putting up the chart here of Elon Musk, notice where his ascendant is. It is in Gemini. So he's got a Gemini rising, and that makes total sense to me. Why? Because Gemini's that thinking mind, curiosity, always learning, always wanting more information, never enough. So they love traveling, learning, talking, communications. This is all Gemini, and I always say Gemini would never think to go anywhere without something to read, because they always are stimulating their mind. They know a little bit about everything, but they're truly bright. So I think we can't put that past Elon, that he is extraordinarily intelligent. And when I think about his chart ruler being Mercury, because Mercury is the planet that rules Gemini, it sits in Gemini in his first house. So he is highly intelligent with that. As a matter of fact, that's actually called a Bhadra Yoga. Whenever you have a planet in its sign of rulership, Gemini rules Mercury, or Mercury rules Gemini, and you put it in one of the angular houses, which are houses of power, which are what? Houses 1, 4, 7, and 10. You put a planet in its own sign. Mercury's own sign is either Gemini or Virgo. So it has to be in either of those signs in an angular house. And what does that do? This is actually called one of the Mahapurusha yogas, which means the yogas of great men. Yeah, I know. It's a little biased towards the sexes in Vedic astrology. That's okay. But getting back to this, what does that mean? It means that everything that Mercury is about is who he is. So what is Mercury about? Once again, let's go over it. It deals with communications. It deals with traveling. It deals with learning. It deals with anything to do with processing and the thinking mind. It's curious. It's always going to be expanding awareness. So I think this in and of itself does describe Elon Musk. Now his sun sits in the first house in the sign of Gemini as well. So looking at this, you're gonna want to know that what house does the sun rule? And it rules the third house, which is again all about communications, learning, information, traveling. Why? Because the third house is relative to the third sign, Gemini. So he's got this mercurial nature about him. Another good thing about Gemini, Mercury on the ascendant or Gemini risings, they usually always look younger than their years throughout their lives. So this is an advantage that Gemini risings have. It's youthfulness. It's the younger one. It's like the Peter Pan of the zodiac. I used to call Gemini Peter Pan because they stay young and they're all over the place, always learning. Information is king to them. So because the ruler of the third sits in the first with Mercury, the third house is said also to be the house of communications. Therefore, it is the house that deals with everything that gets information across to people and connecting people. So what is that? television, the internet, computers, phones. It rules all forms of communications and education. So that's going to be what's brought to him by it being his son and in the first house. And what does he own? Twitter, a communication company. It deals with social media. That's a third house variable. So he was destined to be part of this. Now let's pop over to where his moon sits in the third house in Leo. Interesting, we have another connotation to the third house, which is everything to do with what Gemini and learning, communication is all about. His moon sits there. Now, another variable about the third house that I talk about a lot in many of my books is that the third house deals with performers and entertainers and creativity. So his moon being in Leo, and Leo, by the way, is the most expressive creative sign. And his moon happens to sit also in the nakshatra called Purva Falguni, the most expressive nakshatra of the zodiac. It's pretty profound that this is exactly accentuating who he is. He loves to be the center of attention, and he is pretty much a performer. He's always getting out there and talking about himself, his discoveries. He loves to be the center of attention, to the point where they're kind of like, you know, be quiet, you're making our stock go down in Tesla. No, but it's true. This is what he's all about. He loves to be center stage and performing or acting or getting information out to the world and the public. So he is very, very mercurial in my estimation. So let's pop over to the 8th house right away, because this is what you can't help but notice right off the bat. Look where his Mars is. I mean, if you know anything about Vedic astrology, you should know, and this is for all of you that don't know, Mars is exalted in the sign of Capricorn. So in other words, that's its strongest sign it can be in. And it sits in the 8th house, and it's accentuated by being with Rahu. So whenever Rahu, which is the north node of the moon, sits with the planet, it magnifies it tenfold. I'm serious, it is off the charts. But here's another variable that I think is astounding about this chart, and that is his Mars sits at 27 degrees, 26 minutes. The exact degree. Now, the whole sign of Capricorn is exalted, but there's a degree that makes it the strongest of all, and it's 28 degrees of Capricorn. Look at his Mars. It's less than a degree, applying to the most exalted, powerful degree. So what does this all mean? This makes Mars off the charts powerful. Now, Mars can be a little contentious, and Mars can be a little angry, and Mars can be a little difficult. And trust me, I think he is, especially to his wives and his children. That's a understatement. I think he has 10 children. And some of the names, and you know, he is Elon Musk. Nobody's like Elon Musk. But let me tell you something fascinating about this Mars Rahu in the 8th house in Capricorn. Did you know that Albert Einstein has the same placement? He has Mars Rahu in the 8th house with the Gemini rising. So, I mean, these characters are quite different, but really they're both inventors. And the 8th house deals with what? Research, getting to the core and the bottom of things. This is a remarkable placement. But I have to say this, it's not an easy placement at all. Because for Gemini rising, Mars owns the most difficult houses. It owns the 6th house of struggles, difficulties, enemies. And it also rules the 11th house, which you would think would be great. And in some ways it is. But the planet that rules the 11th house will never rule another house that is good for the chart. It's just the way that this whole astrology paradigm is set up. So for Gemini rising, Mars is the worst planet. And we put it in the worst house, and we magnify it with Rahu. His life has not been easy. And another variable that the 8th house can rule, it deals a lot with disgrace, humiliation, as well as, we know it is the house of death, but it is the house of transformation and change. But it also rules scandals and corruption. Well, we're going to see how that all manifests in his life. But this Mars Rahu makes him part of many scandalous or things that people are constantly talking about, probably with his wives and, you know, all of that kind of stuff doesn't add to making him very saintly, let me just say. But because Mars does rule the 6th house and it sits in the 8th, he does need to watch his health. There's certain things, especially concerning blood flow, that he must be careful of because Mars rules that. But because Mars rules the 6th house of health and healing, and it's in the 8th house of research with Rahu, I believe Elon Musk, and I'm also looking at where his Venus-Saturn sit in the 12th house, which can deal with getting to the bottom of things as well. I believe he will be noted at some point in his life for bringing about some healing discoveries. And when I say healing discoveries, I am referring to disease and health. He will be instrumental at some point in his life with this. And I don't think it's too far off. I think it's when Jupiter goes into Taurus, and he will bring people to space, because when transiting Jupiter does go into Taurus, and by the way, for those of you that don't know, sidereally, transiting Jupiter will go into Taurus May 1st of 2024, and will be there through May of 2025. During this time, transiting Jupiter will be in his 12th house. Now, the 12th house in Vedic astrology we look at as foreign lands and countries. And with him, he is actually a foreigner in the US, so he's in the right place according to this chart. But the 12th house is what's beyond this world as well. And I think that means going into space. When transiting Jupiter is in Taurus, this will bring him to space and to foreign places. Another thing, when Jupiter is in Taurus, Rahu will be in his 10th house, bringing him to a higher position with his work and what he's doing. And I do believe we're going to see some amazing cures possibly come out of Elon Musk before his life is over, and particularly maybe in the next year and a half. So watch for that. Now, another thing that I think is very interesting about his chart is that the Saturn-Venus are in the 12th house. And Venus actually is the only planet that does well in the 12th house, they say. And it's in its own sign. But as I observed before, looking at his chart from the moon as the ascendant, this actually puts that Saturn-Venus in his 10th house, which gives him success and rise to fame. But why does Elon Musk have so much money? I mean, he's considered the richest man in the world right now. And I think it is this 8th house, People don't think about the 8th house as being money, but it is. It is big money. It's money that you acquire through others, and it's money that comes through unforeseen ways. And that Mars Rahu accentuates it. And don't forget, Mars does rule the 11th house of great gains. Plus the Mars Rahu aspects the 2nd house that does deal with the money that you've earned. So this is incredible. Plus, I didn't touch upon the fact that Elon has Ketu in his 2nd house. The 2nd house deals with money, but when it is aspected by other planets, especially powerful planets, it can give the opportunity for money. But I will say Ketu in the 2nd house does denote that, I want to say, his childhood experiences were very, very difficult. And we all know that he started his life out in South Africa, and the apartheid was going on, and it was very turbulent during his childhood. And then his mother proceeded to take him to Canada, but where he went to school, and then we all know he ended up in the US. But what I want you to know about that Ketu being in the 2nd house of early childhood experiences is that he's very different. And this might be why his behavior is very different, because they say he's got like Asperger's or something where there's such an extreme in some way that he's not like everyone else. He's different. And when you're growing up as a kid, that's tough. His mother said he never had any friends. He was always by himself, of course, in his own world, learning, doing all the reading and the stuff that Geminis do. But socially, he's a little off. And we can see that in some of his ways in business. As a matter of fact, I read in his Wikipedia page that his wife, actually, his first wife, they got married, they broke up, got back together. I think they broke up and got back together, whatever, a couple of times. But she asked him to quit treating her like an employee because she was his wife. And that's what Elon does. That's what he knows, and that's who he is. He's focused in that one pursuit, and all the other things are kind of imbalanced in his life. That's what I'll say with this. So Jupiter is the planet I haven't really dissected, and it sits in the 6th house, and it is tight with Neptune. I like to use the outer planets. And if you'll notice, his Neptune as well, next to Jupiter, sits at 7 degrees of Scorpio. Notice where his Saturn sits at 7 degrees of Taurus. So they say when you put an aspect between Saturn, which is reality, and Neptune, which is delusions, conjunct or opposed, people can be delusional at times, but eventually what they can do is bring the truth to reality. What was illusion, what was said to be fiction before, they bring it out. So really, if I could just give you what I think he will amount to at some point, because of Jupiter being in the 6th house, this is another indication that he will bring healing to the planet in terms of maybe some cures. Yes, but as well as that, with Jupiter being in the 6th house and the 8th house variables and the 12th house, we're dealing with Dastana houses. These are the hard ass houses that bring problems with them. His life is not easy, but I think he's got a purpose to, with that Saturn, Neptune, bring truth to the world. He will do this, and that's what I think his whole thing getting Twitter was about, but he's got more to do. The world is going to change, and we will look back at Elon as making one of the biggest differences in the world, like him or not, just like Steve Jobs. He was a difficult character as well. We wouldn't have the world we have today if it weren't for Steve Jobs, as well as Elon Musk will make a major contribution and difference in the world. He already has, but we haven't seen nothing. We haven't seen nothing yet from Elon. So keep your eyes peeled on him and realize that this chart speaks volumes of what the future holds for Elon Musk. So with that, I think I'll close. Remember, if you want to learn Vedic astrology, if this piqued your interest, please go to my university website. I have online classes you can join anytime. It's self-paced. Become a member and my student by going to universityofvedicastrology.com. And remember, I have a new Patreon page. You are going to love it. You're going to get discounts on all my services, come together with a community of like-minded people to help raise consciousness. And if you haven't subscribed to my free newsletter, you're going to get all my predictions delivered to your email address absolutely free every week. Why wouldn't you join? Go to galacticcenter.org. Thank you.